The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 11. Part 2. The search for the weapons was a little longer than could have been expected, but finally the Kendeli found them at the base of the tower, in a small basement that they used to store some weapons. It was easy for the mercenaries to get there. The lower floors were completely empty since all the mags were in the Great Hall preparing to perform the ritual of Elaban's jewels. They found their weapons in perfect condition. Some like Agnorak even changed their sword for one that was in the armory. While they were arming themselves, Kush was very curious to see how Gosberg had managed to sneak inside the Great Tower. "But how did you deceive Fedoras? The great magician thinks that I am only a dwarf and foolish Dengpe. The wine had so much poison that even without a snout I could smell it. The rest is in the art of dissimulation and false appearances." Kush and Agnorak exchanged glances. The Denkka must be totally immune to any poison. Aris watched through a small window, the sun's rays beginning to dawn. "It's dawn. Quick, when the first ray of sunlight enters through the upper dome, Fedoras will perform the ritual and Arian will die," Gosberg added. The mercenaries did not hesitate. They had to climb all the floors of the Great Tower until they reached the ritual hall. Jumal had regained consciousness. A Darrick skull should never be underestimated. Then it was not difficult for him to eliminate his two guards. He did not like unforeseen events. Fedoras had betrayed them and now he had to eliminate him and recover the jewels. Jumal went to his chest and took a compound bow. He was determined. He never failed. Arian didn't know how long he'd been in the big room. All night surely. Mags brought it up from the dungeons to this room, the largest in the tower. The room was totally circular, about 100 meters in diameter and a wide ceiling in the form of a vault. In the center there was an altar where they laid the young woman. Their Fedoras bewitched Arian. A green light spread through her body and then she was paralyzed. She could not speak, except for her eyes. She was totally immobilized. The magicians disappeared and for a few minutes she was left alone in the room. Attempts to move and get out of there were useless. Her body did not obey her. Then 4 magicians appeared to undress her. She was like a rag doll for them. They took off her clothes and dressed her with 2 pieces of a rectangular white cloth with which they covered her most intimate parts. Then they applied a series of oils that smelled of dead fish and the magicians disappeared again. She was alone in the living room. Fedoras made an appearance. Now the number of mags was much greater. They all examined the young woman and gave their opinion. Among them they argued heatedly. Fedoras himself participated in debate. 2 of them, with huge pens and gold ink, began to paint a series of symbols that the young woman did not understand and to draw a series of circles around which they wrote other symbols. Once they finished writing about her body, Fedoras examined her carefully, consulted a scroll, and finally gave his approval. Then 2 other magicians arrived with a chest, opened it and Fedoras gradually placed the jewels in each circle drawn. Each jewel, when it touched Arian's body, the entire room was flooded with a blue light. The jewels were placed in disparate places such as under her eyes, forehead, the base of her neck, her shoulders. They were the right places, as the jewels stuck to the young woman's body, as if they were sewn to her skin. The last one was missing, the triumph of Elaban, which was placed by Fedoras himself just above Arian's sternum. The light this time was very intense, so much so that it forced everyone to close their eyes. Fedoras smiled. Arian was ready for the ritual. She watched as they placed a mirror just above where the triumph of Elaban was placed. They placed it at an angle of 45 degrees with respect to the young woman. Arian understood the essence of the ritual. Its vitality would be catalyzed by the jewels to create a lightning bolt that would come out of Elaban's triumph and bounce by the action of the mirror to fall on Fedoras' body, granting him immortality. His fate was now sealed. Arian was left alone in the darkness again. It didn't take long. The room lit up and gradually began to fill with magicians of the Order, ready to witness the conversion of Fedoras into an immortal being. The room had an upper floor where the lower-ranking apprentices could follow the ritual. Next to the altar, there were a dozen mags forming a circle. Surely they would be the most powerful of the Order after the Grand Master. At last the Grand Master arrived with a solemn air. He had to study the spells necessary to perform the ritual. He had to recite them with the correct intonation, since any mistake in the ritual would be fatal for the two affected subjects. Fedoras wore a white robe with a golden embroidery reserved for very special occasions. Dumal was located on the second floor of the room, crouching in a small room from where he could continue in the ritual. His bow was ready. The traitor of Fedoras would not get away with it. The gems were for his god and society. The Grand Master walked until he was in his place in front of Arian, where the lightning should bathe him completely. Then the other mags held hands and began to sing a series of chants, which was not understandable to Arian. It was a language that had not been used for centuries. While the song that the magicians recited sounded in the background like the sound of the waves of the sea on the beach. Fedoras began to recite his sentences in a deep tone of voice that echoed throughout the room. One by one the jewels began to shine, throwing a bolt of lightning towards the central jewel. Arian tried to scream. The jewels shining burned his skin, then the pain penetrated like a nail into every inch of his flesh. The pain was more and more unbearable. Elaban's triumph began to shine brighter than the others. He felt how it burned him. At the sound of Fedoras' words, the jewels left the young woman's skin and began to rise, held together by the rays. Elaban's triumph shone much brighter and became incandescent. At last a bolt of lightning came out of it and hit the mirror, bouncing to head towards the magician, who was smiling satisfied. Arian felt that he would die as soon as the lightning touched the magician. Fedoras smiled. The divinity awaited him, immortality. The chants of the other magicians surrounded him. The great magician closed his eyes to hope that the lightning would touch him. Nothing. Fedoras opened his eyes in amazement. He couldn't believe it. The mirror hit the ground and broke into 1,000 pieces. The ray of blue light now rose towards the ceiling. Fedoras looked for the cause of his failure with his gaze. There at the entrance door of the room, they were, the mercenaries, and in the front line right to the half-orcs was the Denka. But how was Denka alive? He had poisoned him, with 6 powerful poisons, the most poisonous in all of Sharanis. The mixture would wipe out any mortal being, and they had also thrown it into the pit of abominations. Nothing came out of it. That meant Gosberg was. It couldn't be. It didn't matter anymore. He had failed in his plans for the moment. He would wipe out the mercenaries and then repeat the ritual again. When a favorable lineup existed again, he would be immortal forever. The great wizard was thinking of saying something, but Gosberg did not give him time. A rain of daggers came out of the hand of the Denka, causing a real massacre. Fedoras was miraculously saved, thanks to a protection spell that he had in one of his pendants. Finish off those bastards.